Okay, welcome to the after hours bomb chicka wow wow of the conversation that we've been having on network. Conan, I'm pretty hyped to say that most of the people watching right now from your Twitch. So hell yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Thank you, my adoring friends and fans, for watching me talk about a movie that I like.
Family. I thought you were saying my
No, that'd be funnier though if I said that. Let's pretend I did. No, my family would not watch any of this. They would be like, I don't know what that is, or I don't care what that is. One of the
Well, listen, guys, I wanted to talk about something. I want to talk about how I'm mad as hell and I can't take it anymore.
Exactly.
You know,
that would be like the modern derivation. You know, that would be like when Keith Olbermann was doing his "At Long Last, Sir." You know, doing the Edward R. Murrow callback.
Oh God, I'm having flashbacks to when I was like a young lad, and I was like, Keith Olbermann's so awesome. He hates Bush as much as I do. God, I was so unsophisticated.
He's so edgy and intense.
That's how I was as a teenager.
He was dating and you know, having regular sex with Laura Ingraham throughout that whole period.
God help us all. That's like Bill Maher dating Ann Coulter.
Thank God none of those people have children.
No, they didn't. She's white. They didn't ever date. They just fucked a lot.
All right. Thank God we sorted that out. But yeah, I'm always happy to talk about literally my favorite movie of all time at length, whether anyone's listening or not. So this is great by me. I feel like we were just getting. I mean, we were talking about Faye Dunaway and like how incredible her character is, and you know, and the key to the movie in a lot of ways, right? Like in a lot of ways, like it's there's so many amazing performances, and you know, definitely it all fits together. But she's the catalytic force of destruction for this incredible arc of Howard Beal, you know, and commodifying that and just soullessly, you know, making these decisions that literally end the man's life. I think that's, you know, like her characters. Like what is it? It was something that I maybe noticed later on in life was like how she talks about, like, you know, we talked about the how she does, you know, other than work, she's not able to concentrate on anything. She's like, you know, I'm into everything quickly. I even climax quickly, which is sort of like,
yeah. Like, oh. Wait, hold on. I have the line written down. That
I was gonna say it was a pretty salacious line. I'm like, oh wow, interesting. Tell me more.
And I mean, you know, that's the whole, that's kind of the career woman thing, right? Like that kind of archetype where it's like a career woman can't necessarily just be a woman. They have to kind of take on the traits of a man. But I think I think that because it's Faye Dunaway especially, and she's so, you know, she's beautiful, and everything she kind of does is kind of tinged with this femininity that like is modern and interesting. And you know, and in the case of this movie with William Holden as a character, and with you know, just all of these different older men around her, it kind of takes on a very different context, because it's almost like she's a kid and she has these father issues, and they're all, you know, so those relationships, Robert Duvall too, like these relationships, I think kind of make it less that it feels like she's like this archetype, and more that she's kind of her own kind of character. But it is that kind of that trope that ends up being, you know, pervasive. I'm just trying to find it really fast, the line or the quote of it.
Yeah, I mean, and her character's amazing. Her amazing in her like it's not villainous. It's just like this mundane destroyer of all that is good.
It's always been interesting to me because I've known like women that I guess I would say they're career women. I've dated a few like women that are like very ambitious.
I don't think that line, I don't think that trope really exists anymore in the sense of someone being a coach. Like I think the lines have blurred to the point where, you know, I mean, it's different this generation for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I had this conversation with Albert Lanier, a film critic, about the movie, because I said, you know, her character is so I found it disturbing, her sort of arc. And he's like, well, you know, career women aren't necessarily like a bad thing. I'm like, well, that's not what I'm saying. It's not. I can appreciate a woman that has ambition and things like that. I like women like that in a lot of cases. But her ambition is so ruthless and so morality That's the problem, not
She,
her ambition.
agreed.
Does she really have a and this is what I wanted to portray by, and I'll play it in a minute. This Sidney LeMay clip that I had that Jason's Wi-Fi wouldn't get it out on it. But no, but the clip is he's talking about how throughout this movie nobody really changes, right? Like, I mean, the Howard Beal character I guess does, but like none of these characters are different at the end of the movie than they were really at the beginning. And I think it's most shown by the Faye Dunaway character, right? Like Diana, the only arc for her is a career arc. Like she's in the room with Robert Duvall, and
she gets more powerful, right? Basically,
yeah. But so I have the end of the line, but I think what she said is that she had an affair with her psychoanalyst, and he said that she was the worst lay he ever had. Because she was like a man, she climaxed fast. She wanted to get back into her clothes, and she wanted, So I remember, but I seem to be inept at everything except my work. So I confine myself to my work. All I want in life is a 30 share and a 25 rating, which honestly makes her more human. I think that explanation than by the end of the movie, what you see, because at the end you realize that this is somebody, and you see it throughout her relationship with William Holden, Max Schumacher, like throughout this movie, like. You see that it's this thing where she can't stop talking about her work, and it becomes like
at all ever.
Yeah.
Well, it's weird because like in a way I think she does maybe not change, but like she goes that extra step at the end in sort of giving up any pretense of like any semblance of doing anything moral. She's like, well, yeah, Bill is bad for ratings. Let's assassinate Howard Bill. I think. I don't know if that's a change, but it's she goes even further.
Sorry, the comment that I just about Keith Olbermann's sexual.
I love that comment.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm the one that invoked Keith Olbermann, but like, hey, whatever. It's either here or
hey, don't say the third time.
No, I know, right? It's like the other guy who I'm not going to say his name on. But he's
like Candyman. He'll just show up.
Ah! I've always wondered about the metrics of that.
I'm so fucking excited for that movie. By the way, that is one of my favorite movies of all time. The one we can't say, of course, because if we say it another time.
But is it like 3 times in an hour, in a day, in a 10-minute?
No, I think it's just in general.
Fortnight?
I don't know. I'll say it. Beetlejuice. I am very excited to talk about Beetlejuice. I love Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice
is great.
It's showtime. So no, but like I think that we kind of watch a career arc, right? Like we don't watch she changes, right? She gets further dehumanized throughout the course of this movie. And I agree with you, JD, that is the case. But I also think that we're not necessarily watching we're kind of watching her dehumanization as she fully realizes what she can do, rather than fully realizing like, I become less human. Because there are movies, I think, where somebody kind of as their power gets bigger, or as their, they kind of lose facets of themselves. I don't
Citizen
necessarily.
Kane.
Yeah. No, exactly. Another one of those Hearst related movies. But facets of somebody drop off as the movie goes on. I don't necessarily think those facets are there. I think that she's, because in the beginning of it, she's kind of it just seems you don't know her as an audience as well, and William Holden's character doesn't know her as Max. You know what I mean? Like, so it seems like kind of these quirky things where it's like, oh well, I just focus on my work. You're like, well, like a lot of people say something like that. Like it doesn't necessarily mean that like you're gonna be fucking, and while you're fucking, they climax really fast and then keep talking about their work the entire time. Like you think like, oh, this is somebody kind of kind of being self depreciating or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like kind of doing this kind of thing where like, oh, I just focus on my work. But like you realize throughout the course of it, like, no, this is the perfect like either television or neoliberal subject where it's somebody that isn't capable of getting outside of that. Like that's literally all that exists.
Like doesn't have the capacity to do so.
Yeah.
Like to be like as others have said in the movie, like to be human, right? The things that make someone human just utterly lacks any of those. Again, go back to the Faye Dunaway character being like the antecedent to like, the Pete Buttigieg's of the world, where it's just like, is there anything behind those eyes? Like what's behind there?
Well, I'm happy you haven't watched that documentary.
I'm never going to watch it. I will never watch it.
That's what I said until we had our Kenzo episode. Nope. And I was like, but I was also just drunk. I watched it and I was drunk, and I was like, and then I stopped drinking in the middle of watching it, and I was like, oh, this is not something I want to be watching, or I should be watching, and then just like stayed transfixed in the same way that somebody would say, to bring it back to the to the movie, like the same way that you would be transfixed by something like watching a Liberation Army maybe rob a bank, or like watching this an act of violence on TV. Like in the same way, it's just like this complete dehumanization throughout this movie that you're just kind of transfixed into watching, because it just feels so realistic, and you're kind of seeing something that, I mean, he doesn't feel realistic as a human being, but he feels realistic in terms of like, you're kind of watching something behind the scenes that you're like, oh fuck, I don't know if I should be like watching this. I'm going to keep it on.
Well, I mean, someone brought up a good, and it becomes so quickly normalized too, that like, it was brought up in the comments, like before we went live, that, I think it was Kevin Seal said something along the lines of, when Howard Beale's like walking along, I must make my witness. And the doorman says, sure thing, Mr. Beale. Like, it's just like, that's his shtick. He's that guy. He does that. He's the guy that does that thing. Right. He's maybe it was Eric Dent. Sorry, my bad. But like it's so how something that is like a caterwaul in the wilderness from like the deepest, darkest place of a man's soul becomes like, oh yeah, that's that guy's deal. That's what he does. He's the guy that goes on TV and yells about stuff.
And a big, I mean, yeah, no, and a big part of that is kind of somebody being rich, like somebody being in the position of somebody like Howard Beale, where they've kind of been on TV forever, and you've probably been their doorman forever.
It's already a known commodity. Like, yeah, exactly.
And you're kind of like, your job is like, oh, you're just supposed to open the door for this person. You become dehumanized too, because you're kind of just a cog in the machine that's supposed to just go, all right, well, whether that person's crazy or not, okay, have fun. Like, you know what I mean? Like, no doorman in a rich person's home is supposed to express concern for that person. Like, if they come in ranting and raving, it's just supposed to be like, oh, well, this is a commodity. This is a person that's, you're just kind of the door, like, for them to get into their apartment. Like, okay, have a good time. Like, someone else comes
whatever.
They might not be someone that's, you don't let them in. You let this, like, I don't know. It just kind of becomes another, like almost a piece of the building that you're residing in. But I like this speech that he gives. He was like, a rich little man with white hair died. What does that have to do with the price of rice? And why is that woe to us? He goes, less than 3% of you people read books. Because less than 15% of you people read newspapers. Because the only truth you know is what you get out of this tube. Because right now there's a whole generation that didn't know anything that didn't come out of this tube. The tube is gospel, the ultimate revelation. This tube can make or break presidents, popes, prime ministers. This tube is the most awesome goddamn force in the world, and woe is us if it ever falls into the wrong hands. That's why woe is us that Edward George Ruddy died, because this company is now in the hands of CCA, the Communications Corporation of America. There's a new chairman of the board sitting in Mr. Ruddy's office on the 20th floor, a man named Frank Hackett. And when the 12th largest company in the world controls the most goddamn awesome propaganda force in the whole godless world, who knows what shit will be peddled for truth in this network. And that in that moment, though, like that kind of thrashing against the establishment isn't seen as anything damaging, right? Because people are just kind of transfixed. And when he goes, turn your televisions off, turn them off, turn them off, turn them off, and then, faints in front of the camera. That's not seen as something that could be damaging to the network. That's entertainment.
No,
that's a commodity.
That's exactly. And nobody does, right? People are like, no, fuck no, I'm not turning. I'm gonna see what happens next,
Is he dead? Is he?
Yeah, what's gonna happen with this dude?
Yeah, like exactly. And the only real time that anybody freaks out, and it's incredibly interesting that the scene is, no one's really like watching the TV. Like Frank Hackett, the Robert Duvall character walks the phone and is like, turn that goddamn shit down, like not really caring what's on it, and then gets the phone call that he's he's actually made comments and tried to get political action, right? Like the lack of collective political action really is what capitalism itself, what the networks, what everybody is really hoping for, is that so much bad shit is happening in the world. They can kind of just, show you so much shit, just shovel it into your face that no one is going to be like, there's just too many things going on. Like and I feel that with myself a lot of times. And I feel that as someone that, I'm really happy that I don't as much right now, but like covered politics for, for Ben, especially like the first real like incredibly tragic thing that happened was the when activity started up again in the Gaza Strip this winter. And that was like really like throughout this time period, like with me as the person in front of the camera, like that was the first really, really tragic, brutal thing that I had to research into. And I remember watching the video of that one like little 10-year-old girl. And this was just like one of those like now this video is almost like where it's like, oh, isn't this sad? She was like crying and she couldn't understand why everybody, like all of her friends were being bombed, like all these houses were being bombed.
And then she was given a Pepsi and it all worked out.
No, but so she was like, why is this happening? And she like, she couldn't figure it out. And I started sobbing. And I realized that like covering politics is not something that I could ever like, that I'm ever should be doing as a main thing, because I am affected by these things. Right. Like I feel empathy for that little girl. I feel empathy for, people across the world. I have this humanism that's so built up into me that like watching somebody like Howard Beal in Network, like bringing it back to that, it finally feels all of these different things and realizes like my life didn't amount to anything. I'm kind of just a spokesman for a corporation. Let me kind of first rage against the machine, I guess, like kind of thrash. And the machine kind of just, in the way that Mark Fisher brings up in Capitalist Realism, like it subsumes all kind of anti-capitalist violence. It subsumes all resistance to it. But the second you kind of bring up political action, like, hey, stop this merger, that's when the forces of nature come down on you. Like
look like people like posting anti-Facebook tirades on Facebook, where it's like, you know that like you're just helping this platform by doing that. Like
and it's a constant subsuming of that kind of content. And the fact that you have someone like Diana, like this Faye Dunaway character that, it's like, well, you really gonna let me put my like communist rants on TV? She's like, I don't give a fuck about what you do politically. Like, I just want to sell ads. And
I just want to get the ratings.
Like, yeah. I don't know. You realize in that moment, like, oh shit, like this is something that's so fully subsumed everything that it's like everything is spectacle. Everything is just completely taken over by this until, the point where it's like the Achilles heel, where it's like, hey, maybe don't let this network consolidate further. And it's like, oh, that's when, you have to
that's when you take him aside and you give him the speech. Exactly.
Yeah. You have meddled with the primal forces, the primal forces of nature. You have to give him that. To bring the wrath of God.
And everyone remembers that part, and everyone remembers that "and you will atone" part. Which is great that they should. But that whole middle part about talking would be like one major corporation with every person being a shareholder, this and that. I mean, he's basically articulating
there is no America. There is no democracy. Yes. There's only IBM, ITT, and Union Carbide. There's so
like replace the names, and like it's still the same thing, man.
So I wrote down
Amazon, Google, Facebook.
I wrote down all of it, like the entire speech. I just kept going back and writing sentence by sentence, and I do really. It's a really amazingly prophetic part where he goes, "You get up on your 21-inch screen, you howl about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. There's only IBM, ITT." And DuPont, Dow, Union Carbide, and Exxon. These are the nations today. What do you think the Russians talk about in their councils of state? Karl Marx laid out their linear programming, statistical decision theories, Minimax solutions, and compute the price-cost probabilities of their investments and transactions, just like we do. And it is this belief that there's a post-ideological world, coming up. That suddenly we won't need ideologies. We don't need Karl Marx predicting
the end of history.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, to a certain degree, I guess a critique could be made that this movie is made for guys like us to quote at and shout at each other. But like the fact of the matter, and we've harkened upon it multiple times in this show and the regular show, that it's just changed like 2 words and it's still exactly the same, which is soul-breakingly depressing. But like, where's the lie? right? I mean, like, you know, that's what they believe. Everyone that has this power is actively doing this literally every day. So what part of this is incorrect?
I went to college relatively recently. I mean, 2017 is when I graduated, so it was relatively recently. And I think it's gotten worse since then, I think, by one. But one of the things that I had a professor that I liked a lot. Well, I liked all my professors. I didn't have a bad professor at SUNY New Paltz when I went. But one of the professors that I liked a lot had a media consolidation chart. And it was like, in terms of
this shows all the corporate, like,
it showed every possible corporate merger, and it had come down to like 6 major media conglomerates. You know what I mean? And 1976, there's far more than that. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just 6, but like it's gotten to the point where these major media conglomerates are able to consolidate. And there are times when the government decides, you know what, this is too much. This is too much of a conglomerate. Like, I remember like the Disney Fox one, which nobody should ever have let that happen. Nobody should ever have let, you know what I mean? Like Fox sell 21st Century Fox to Disney. That should not have ever fucking happened.
They just wanted to get Spider-Man into the MCU. That was the only reason.
It was actually Christina that approved that.
Right.
No, but
I love her commitment to the bit, and it's not a bit at all with her. But I love every part of it. And I'm here for it, and I'm in great support of it as much as I don't understand it.
But so it gets down to that level though, where it's like you're learning that in a media studies class, which I took quite a few media studies class. Movie Night Extravaganza was inspired by one of my film studies classes, like the idea for that, what became the seed that ended up, as that podcast. So I owe a lot to these classes, but it kind of was taken as like, yeah, it's fucked up, but like, this is the way things are now, and you should know that. And rather than being like, how can we stop this?
Because the thing is, the time to stop it was around the time this movie was made.
Yeah.
Meaning that like, that's tough. That like the time to stop this was literally before I was born. Would have been the time to stop this, right? And it's
says Movie Night Extravaganza after hours is like my local pub after hours, much darker and more depressing than regular hours, and yet both cases here I am.
Speaking of which, we should do after hours sometimes. That is an underrated Scorsese classic.
Yeah, but
sorry, I didn't realize that was going to be as strong of a non sequitur as it was. But like, I think that, but the idea, like one of the reasons why Beal's impassioned ranting about this corporate acquisition or merger and so on is so impactful is the fact that there still was like a brief window of time where people could actually have done something about it. Now it's just like, okay, so I'm going to harken this back to, I talked about this, I think, with Varn. When we talked about pretty far-ranging conversation, and I talked about how there used to be like a stigma in the rock and roll world, at least, of selling out. Oh, so-and-so sold out. Their music isn't an ad. We're now like...
Well, we also talked about that on Sid and Nancy with Varn, which is interesting. Yeah.
That's right. We did. But the thing is, nowadays, like, if you talk to younger musicians, especially, like, what? Like, they don't even understand what you're talking about. They're like, sell out. What? Of course we're in an Apple ad. That's like how people find out about your band now. Like, that's how effectively, in the same way that the entire culture, I was gonna say, in the same way that the entire culture has been trained to like rent their music rather than to own their music. And in the same way, people have been trained to, at the whim of the corporate overlords, have things available to them in streaming form, again, without actually owning anything and with any of those terms and services being allowed to change at any moment in time. We have been trained culturally that since this is better for the corporations, do it this way. You can thank Apple for that. Apple's the one.
Sorry for not letting you talk for the last.
No, I was just gonna say, I think that that's one way to look at it. I think another way is, and I'm not making excuses here.
Right. The correct way, exactly. Thank you.
But I think there's also this problem of each of us has our own complicity in the society we live in. So
society. Yeah.
Well, it's like, how do you, I think it's almost too painful for a lot of people, or they don't want to look at
Even
that,
within
like
the
our own
society.
complicity in reproducing, you know, a very, I would say, wrong-headed system that we have.
Yeah, well, I think you're onto something very important, because people don't want to have to take the accountability that they're part of the problem. They want to look at it as, oh, this horrible outside force has done this thing to me and the people I care about. Like, no, you know what? It's that Pogo cartoon, right? We've met the enemy and he's us. Like, that's 100% true.
Well,
Like,
it's the thing that it's the thing that we see that animates so much of like right-wing conspiracy culture and QAnon on one hand, or even like Russiagate on the other hand. It's like, if we just get rid of the bad external force, everything will be fine.
Right, it'll sort itself out.
Return to the golden age. We'll return to the good days of America. And, you know, that's easier for people to digest, or it's less painful than saying, what if we're all complicit in reproducing a very unjust system?
Look at 2020, right? Biden said return to normalcy. Sanders was like, hey, the world's changed and we need to be cognizant of the fact that we are part of those changes, whether we want that to be the case or not. Guess what people wanted? Oh, return to normalcy sounds great. Let's do that.
Sanders said, did you guys know that CCA is about to combine with...
That's a pretty spun-on Bernie impression.
It's pretty good.
I've been working at it for a while. Ever since I saw the video that was like, charge their phone, work, be bisexual, eat hot chip, and lie. I did want to play the...
Yeah. I just since JG brought it up, I thought it was a good point that, like, literally that was the choice in the primaries. And honestly, you know, like, whatever, I could spend an entire podcast talking about that because I experienced it firsthand. But like, really, that was how Biden got elected. You can say any other thing, but the idea, whether it makes any sense or not, frankly, I don't think it does. But the idea that there could be a return to the good old days, like how things used to be like the good old days, that's how he got in there.
Are you guys both free on Saturday at 2 p.m.? I feel like some of these threads would be interesting to follow on Sabbath, like the more political side of it would be interesting to follow on Sabbath Cypher if I can get
I'll
Kenzo
probably be free.
I'll talk to Kenzo about, like, because there's
I'm washing my hair
that I do. No, there's a lot of threads on this that I do want to continue.
We never talk about this on our show, but like, this is the perfect jumping off point for a lot of this stuff, because like a lot of the, like all the media consolidation stuff, all like the commodification of dissent, like that's like right down the line for me, man.
Well, so I think that there's an interesting moment this happened where conservatives, like the more right wing, corporate right wing, not like the far right, like the more quote unquote like populist right, which aren't actually populist, but like, you know, the more corporate right loves to pull in the individuality piece when it benefits them. Like, they love to be like, oh, well, all of us have as individuals, our situation is really just, you know, our own cause. Like, you can't expect government to be there for you. And that's the only time that really they bring that up, right? Like, it's this, like, you know, as an individual, if you failed, it's your own failure. Rather than talking about society, the way society has gone, and kind of the lack of interest, or the more apathetic side to where a lot of people have been for the last 40 years, which kind of, like, there are moments where people could have, you know, jumped up and said, hey, like, this is something that I actually do really care about. And I think Network is a great movie to talk about with this, because it's like you get so flooded at some point by all of this misery. And I feel this in my own, this is me a lot of, like, talking about myself in this too. I feel like I get flooded by so many stories of misery that it's like, oh, well, maybe you have to kind of pick and choose where your energies go. And then it gets to the point where at some point you're like apathetic to things, and you're like, oh, well, you know, this is just the way the world is. But I do think that there are real moments where if you take political action, which is why in Network, you know, the one time that anybody really objects to what Howard Beal is doing, this anger, this thrashing, this, you know, is the only time anyone objects to it is when, like, actual collective political action towards the company itself is taken to stop a merger, which is the time that you could have a real impact on society itself, right? Like, you're like, hey, I don't believe that this company should buy up this company. I don't believe media should be further consolidated. I don't believe that corporations should be making this decision. And that's the moment where corporations are like, oh, fuck, they actually care about this. Rather than kind of, the more right-wing side of this, which is like, look, someone's homeless. They must have caused that. We don't have to help them.
Sure. And part of that's, that's the whole Adam Curtis thing, right? The can't get you out of my head situation, like the focus on the individualist over collective action, so on and so on. And like how we've basically culturally been trained that way. But I will argue that a lot of that really has to do, to a certain degree, too, with choices we made, like the Patriot Act, right? Trading away freedom for safety. And at the time, under George W. Bush, even like, people that were coming from a progressive standpoint were more concerned about government overreach. But what pretty much everyone but the EFF and me were not really focusing on is the fact like, wow, this is going to mean that literally everything you do and are is going to be bought and sold over and over and over again until the end of time. Because once a genie leaves the bottle, we're going to do put it back in. Oh, put that genie back in quick. Get that's Kazam over here. Throw him in this bottle.
And that's another point that Adam Curtis makes a lot with, like, if you like this, you'll love this, right? Like, being like, oh, if you love, and he did it really well. And I thought it was in Hypernormalization, but then I didn't see it again when I watched it. Where he's like, if you love this, which is like Clinton, then you'll love this, which is like Obama. And then
absolutely. And the thing is, a lot of people kind of got into a habit of not speaking out against it when it was something that, oh, well, I like that, so I'm not going to say anything about it. But, well, just because you like it doesn't mean it isn't odious, right? And so this is going to be interesting, I think, because if we're talking about this kind of stuff, I think we need to talk about the 2004 election, where the fact that a lot of the people that were backing Dennis Kucinich were completely fine with like the unitary executive stuff as long as it was our guy in charge. Right? Like, as long as it was Dennis Kucinich that was in charge and made the Department of Peace and all the other goof ass shit that guy wanted. And I say that as a fan of the dude. It was like, that's some goofy shit, bro.
My mom was a big Dennis Kucinich fan.
You know what?
I interviewed him a few months ago.
He looks trustworthy.
He's a guy.
He's a fun guy. He's a nice fella. I opened for him once at a speaking event. That's a long story in and of itself. But like, the problem I had had nothing with Kucinich, is the fact that like people still wanted this unitary executive power as long as it was quote unquote our guy. And I'm like, well, that's a problem, because what you're talking about is changing like this institution to be something it's conditional. It's conditional upon who's in power. And
this is something C. Derek Varn complains about a lot. Bonapartism.
Yes. And it's important because I think we never get to the point of talking about it, because like, let's just reductively call it the left, never gets remotely close to power. So we start thinking about like, well, fuck it, man. If I got it, I'd push the button, to make all the people I don't like disappear or whatever, like, okay, like, cool. And not saying I mean that like literally. I'm just saying the fact that like, and I'm not even saying I'm an institutionalist. I'm just saying that we need to be aware Tony, of conditional morality.
Imagine this idea: left CIA.
It's like they're CIA, but they wear pussy hats, the pink pussy hats.
No, don't ever say that. Left CIA. No, it's the CIA, but they have like communist or like Soviet Union patches. You know what I mean? Che Guevara shirts. It's the CIA with Che Guevara shirts.
Go get their asses. Great.
Which actually is the CIA now. But the CIA that drives electric cars.
So I don't want to go too off topic, but
the hilarious Ron Pertwee. Thank you.
I wanted to comment on something with regards to.
I know you say you don't want to go off topic. I think we hit like 17 different topics.
Well, 10 minutes, just in terms of what Forrest was talking about with neoliberalism. One thing I think that the neoliberal turn. Network was sort of at the advent of that in a lot of ways. We've been living in it for 40 years now. We had Nixon right before Ford took office saying we're all Keynesians now, like, and I think that, I mean, I was listening to Hella Presidents, like the Matt Christman thing where he kind of traced through these
kind of social contracts between like, you know, executive branch and working people that kind of have fallen apart. And, you know, I think that Nixon kind of is the tail end of this. Nixon obviously is a very conservative turn, but still, like
he still believed
really
in the existence of the welfare state.
Yeah, and he's the last person that really, he's the last president that we have that really believes in Keynesianism.
The sort of FDR, New Deal, and then LBJ Great Society era, that was like almost a 40-year period too. And I think people should consider, and this is its own sort of subject, but I think we could see another turn away from neoliberalism. But I also don't think that necessarily means it's going to be a turn in favor of the left. It can go in many different directions. I mean, right now,
it's a jump ball. It's a jump ball.
I thought you were going to say a turn that's good.
I mean, there could be bad turns and good turns, but I think we are seeing a potential changing of the guard in the coming decades.
We're going to replace it with something terrific. Remember that was like what Trump said about the Obamacare. Something terrific is what we're going to replace it with.
Look, neoliberalism is over. We're going to replace it now with Bernieism. Charge their phone.
We're gonna replace it with something terrific. Like, what is it? We're not going to tell you, but it's something terrific. Sorry, JG, go ahead.
Well,
finish.
I was just going to say, I think there could be changes happening or another turn. I don't know what it's going to be, though. Sorry.
Cipher. No, I got a confirmation. You guys are formally invited at 2 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday on the Sabbath Cipher to continue some of the threads of this conversation.
All 17 of them.
I guess the point I was trying to get at, and I've been thinking about this a lot.
Good luck.
Lately.
Let me know how it works out for you.
Oh!
So with the idea of another turn away from neoliberalism, I mean, we're seeing right now something that I consider kind of frightening with the emergence of the new right, the 21st century new right, which is a conglomeration of different elements of the younger intelligentsia within right-wing think tanks and publications. There is a turn by a lot of those elements, those younger elements, against a lot of things like Reaganism. They want a different type of, they want to redefine what conservative means. I don't think that's necessarily going to be in a good direction. And I almost think the left has to head them off at the pass in some ways. But it's a hard job. It's like, what do we replace the current system with?
Well, you have this thing, and you kind of still have it with whether it's kind of, and I like her, but like whether it's kind of Crystal Ball and like Kyle Kalinske, like that, like the populist left, and then you have kind of the idea of kind of, and it's a cynical, very stupid idea, and I'd like to talk about this a lot more on Saturday on Kenzo's show, because I don't think this is necessarily a thing that I really want to get into too deeply on this show, but like kind of the idea of like, oh, there's some kind of left and right consensus that can be reached on a lot of different issues, and it's kind of this populist turn, and it's like right-wing populism is never going to be that, but it does seem like that is the turn away from neoliberalism in the minds of people that are kind of promoting that, right? Like certain companies get kind of people suddenly stand up, they're like, oh, we don't like tech giants, we don't like Amazon, we don't like Facebook, which who the fuck does? We don't like any of these tech companies. But then you realize that with the right, it's like, we don't like them because we think that they censored our speech. Let's get somebody like Ben Shapiro on the Facebook board, which happened. Like on the Facebook, they got Daily Wire on the. We should.
Yeah, the whole. I think they're calling that whole left-right consensus thing. The big term everyone's using for it is the realignment. And I mean, we'll move on from this, but I'm very skeptical of that. And I'm someone who,
it's reductive. It's completely reductive.
I will talk to like libertarians and conservatives on very specific issues related to maybe being anti-war or against the forever wars. But I think the whole idea of the realignment, that there is like this new consensus emerging between the left and the right, I think that's like, it's what you said. It's too reductive. Maybe we can find very specific areas to work with people on.
Just Glen Greenwald's nose That's the.
but the thing is, but here's a problem with that is that like and again, I don't like doing something like simplifying it to a right versus left thing, but the people on the left that have power within media believe so hard in redemption stories that they're willing to take half the project for A New American Century and put them on as like featured guests on their shows.
Yeah,
and there's so well, hold on, that's the beginning, that's not the end, Forrest, if I may. So like the point of that's fine. So the point of it is this, like, if you want to actually achieve some degree of common ground, you have to accept the idea that there could be such thing as temporary alliances. And this is the only problem with all these rants about wokeism. The only thing I think that has any value there is the idea that like we have to dispense with the idea that we have to 100% agree with someone all the time for them to be politically useful or to advance the goals of equality or power. And that's a hard task for a lot of people to take. And I get it, because it means sometimes shutting up. Sometimes it means your opinion isn't needed right now. We're trying to do a thing, and maybe if you could just shut up and help us do the thing. Is Manchin a piece of shit? Yes, of course he is. Do you need to announce that he's a piece of shit? Fuck no, you shouldn't. You need that motherfucker to like do like a thing. And there's so many, and that's like the Beltway, like, you know, like lamestream media example. But we just can't handle it right now. It either has to be full rehabilitation, like George W. Bush. George W. Bush is great now. If you're like a liberal, like, oh, George W. Bush is good, he's a good painter. I'm like, I'm sorry, do you not remember like the endless wars and like the Patriot Act and like all of these horrific things that motherfucker did? I will never forget any of those things. But the thing is, you don't have to wholesale adopt someone into your family to realize that it's politically expedient to have an alliance with them. And that comes back to what I said, and I went off on a very impassioned rant on They Live, which I was a little bit of a dick for, but not wrong, about the idea of language mattering, like a Lakoff thing, right? It would have been far more poignant and useful, but not cathartic, to talk about police reform instead of defund the police. But that's what you get when you get your sloganing from bottom up, which is like, what's more fun to chant? Regulatory reform. No, it's, you know,
well, in a way,
cops.
In a way, this comes back. This comes back to network, because I think we live in this environment now where everything is sort of like a big spectacle, and everyone's sort of like in their box, and we don't think about temporary alliances that much.
I really hate having online brain, because there's the worst person on Twitter that has guy, the infrared guy, the infrared guy that just got banned. That the video went viral, and he's like, everything's a spectacle. It's all capitalism. Or he's making fun. Never mind. That shit's been in my. Never mind that.
Ron, if you want to do a show about the class dynamics of Cobra Kai, I'm way in, because I love that show, and I can't believe nobody seized on that. It's freaking genius.
By the way, more than anyone else, I think Andy would be into that. But Conan, your point about this, I think that. So I think that there's a neocon neoliberal consensus that was very easy to reach, because they never really kind of had a disagreement with each other, right? Like
that's how Bill Kristol ends up on like freaking MSNBC, right? Well, because they have more in common with him than Bernie Sanders.
Look at the 2004 election as an example of this, right? Like the differences between John Kerry, who started out as a genuinely kind of heroic figure at the end of the Vietnam War, kind of not having an actual criticism of George Bush's policies besides, they've mishandled.
He misadministrated it, I think, right?
Yeah.
I should know. I campaigned for that motherfucker.
I think there's often.
But wait, JJ, can I? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I know I interrupted you to make this point, but so I think that's an example, and then another example is obviously Bill Clinton kind of out Reaganing Bob Dole in 1996, doing a very similar thing, where and Joe Biden kind of nipping at Clinton's heels too, being like, "Come on, we need to do this. We're kind of moving right." we're snatching bodies, we're moving right. Throughout that whole time period, where the Democratic and Republican parties, the same way that it was kind of in something like the 1890s, there isn't a fundamental difference between the two platforms. You're kind of in a consensus about where the country is going economically and financially, and where we're going. Wait, I just need to make this point. So you have
it's your show. You don't need to beg us, dude. You can like.
No, I know, but JD
you can turn us off at any moment.
Everyone's kicked out. No, but so there's that moment, right? The realignment idea of the populist right, the populist left is, though the establishment has already come to this consensus, the New York Times is just as willing as any and I know this probably fucking dates it, but like the New York Herald Tribune, which is like the original, New York Times rival in New York City as the conservative paper, like the one obsessively conservative paper throughout the entire 1900s, the 20th century, like their rival or whatever. You know what I mean?
Nobody outside New York cares about that, but yeah, I get the reference.
No, but those are kind of the two. I mean, for a lot of the 1900s, those are the papers.
There's plenty of other. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
What the Wisconsin rag? No.
Hey man, Wisconsin has a socialist mayor in the early 1900s. I know what New York was up to.
The Madison Monday paper. Anyway, so there's kind of this idea that this consensus has already been reached, and there's some kind of populist which doesn't exist on the right, I don't think, because economically they're still in the same place, and it's kind of it's a culture war thing. But this kind of idea that outside of this establishment, which I agrees on like 95% of things, right? Like John Kerry and George Bush, like they agree on most everything. There's no real differences between those two positions. This idea that like, oh, well, maybe suddenly Tucker Carlson and Crystal Ball, because they both don't like Amazon, might agree on something. But it's like this desperation that people outside of this consensus, which I don't think Tucker Carlson is outside of this consensus, because he has that famous clip where he's wearing his big bow tie and he says, oh, if elitism is a thing, I'm quite the elitist. But, people have bought into it because people have the memory of a goldfish when it comes to cable news. And they're like, oh, well, this is some kind of right populism. He talks shit about Jeff Bezos sometimes. There must be some realignment happening. There isn't. That doesn't exist. If you don't have a class analysis, there can't be at this point. We're kind of at a point where things are so settled that we need to understand that as a class, we need to stand up and rise up against people that are sitting there at the top that aren't going to give anything up. But there is this desperate belief that like somehow, cable news and independent media can somehow go back and forth and create this this clash. And suddenly there's a realignment and shows that aren't necessarily taken on by cable networks like Rising, that is taken on by The Hill, which is a completely fucking also a fucking corporation. But
it's up there with Politico. It's like it's belly brain stuff.
Like these billionaires can somehow take on these billionaires. And a perfect example of another version of that, I think, is that I really don't want to ever mention him again, and I hope I don't have to, but Glen Greenwald tried to shit on the
don't say it again. It's Beetlejuice rules.
He comes up and just starts fucking contrariating our show, so
he finds tweets that he wasn't added in. So why would you think it would be anything other than
that's fucking crazy. Who the fuck follows me that ratted to that man? But but he made a deal with Pierre Omar, I think, or like that billionaire.
Pierre Omidyar.
I've never had to actually say it. I've only read it. But he made that deal, and then
I fucking love Reddit. I upgrade stuff all the time.
That's where I find the most fucked up porn links. Anyway, so he made that deal on The Intercept and then laid off a lot of their staff, took his own money that he was making from The Intercept, gave himself a healthy bonus, so he was the person there making the most. And then I don't remember whether it was Jordan Ull or whether it was, I think it might have been. Like, there's someone that's working for The Intercept that he was going back and forth with that I like a lot on Twitter. And then he was like, oh, how's that Pierre Omidyar money coming? But he didn't mention that he was the one that made that deal. Meanwhile, he's working with Peter Thiel to to have his own fucking shit on Rumble Finance, and it's like this populist wave where it's like, oh well, you know, you guys are financed by a billionaire too. It's like, to go back to the point that this started off, this is Jay Hutch. I agree, you guys should do an episode on Scorsese's After Hours. But you know, I wanted to play the Ned Beatty speech. We actually have gone.
You do. I think we owe JG Michael at least 2 minutes of uninterrupted response to literally any of the things we talked about in the last 15 minutes.
No, I was going to go on a rant about foreign policy, but I don't want to go even more off topic than we did. I was just going to say, I guess to sum it up, I think there's this idea that the establishment, or what some people in foreign policy circles call the blob, which I think is a useful term, that there's a consensus, and there is a consensus, but that consensus actually happens through, I would say, neocons like Bill Kristol end up having overlap with, say, people like Madeleine Albright, because they can come together on certain issues for very different reasons, but they usually have like very subtle differences in terms of policy. So I wouldn't say they're exactly the same, but there is like a large overlap. There is sort of a consensus that gets created even when, you know, people in DC have disagreements over how things should be done. That makes sense. I think within DC, there's a lot of coalition building. And I think the left needs to do coalition building more.
Well, 100%. I think you're dead on with that. And I think the fact that, you know, a lot of what we call, you know, Beltway brain and whatnot are people that, you know, they characterized as like, look, we can get over our political views and agree on things. And I would say they actually have the same values, which is say to value the donors and the other people that are considered that are considered important to them. Which is to say that, like,
Saudis. Can't forget about them. No matter who's in charge.
Well, but the thing is, you know, nobody likes to hear it because they're never going to explicitly, they're going to be like, how dare you say I don't represent my constituents, you know, right? Like that's how they're going to characterize it. But again, so go back to my point about framed language, about framing it that way. As much as like, yeah, it's a rallying cry from our side because screw them jerks, right? I don't know if that's a winning message to pull people over because what is the saying that there's no working class in America, just a bunch of temporarily embarrassed millionaires?
Yeah.
No, that's
the quote.
That's a hashtag too real statement because everybody thinks that they're just like, you know, one.
And it's like 100-year-old quote. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like it's.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was oh God, what is it? I can't remember. Same guy who was I don't belong to any organized political party. I'm a Democrat. Gene Autry, I think, is that it? Maybe I can't remember. Anyway, you want to play a clip? I'll look all this stuff up.
No, I just wanted to play the Ned Beatty speech.
Oh yeah. So anyway, so let's get back on task here. This is basically the best summation of like capitalism, you know, whatever, neoliberal, blah 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 blah. Our entire whole thing is it's this. So
you guys ready?
Enjoy.
For Conan's neoliberal blah 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 podcast coming out.
God, I wouldn't even listen. Canceled after one episode, after a quarter of an episode. There's a lot of titles for this.
You have meddled with the primal forces of nature, Mr. Beal, and I won't have it. Is that clear? You think you merely stopped a business deal? That is not the case. The Arabs have taken billions of dollars out of this country, and now they must put it back. It is airflow. I don't have it. It is ecological balance. You are an old man who thinks in terms of nations and peoples. There are no nations. There are no peoples. There are no Russians. There are no Arabs. There are no third worlds. There is no West. There is only one holistic system of systems. One vast and immane, interwoven, interacting, multivariate, multinational dominion of dollars. Petrodollars, electrodollars, multi-dollars, rubles, pounds, and shekels. It is the international system of currency which determines the totality of life on this planet. That is the natural order of things today. That is the atomic and subatomic and galactic structure of things today. And you have meddled with the primal forces of nature. And you will atone. Am I getting through to you, Mr. Beal? You get up on your little 21-inch screen and howl about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. There is only IBM and ITT and AT&T and DuPont, Dow, Union Carbide, and Exxon. Those are the nations of the world today. What do you think the Russians talk about in their councils of state? Karl Marx? They get out their linear programming charts, statistical decision theories, Minimax solutions, and compute the price-cost probabilities of their transactions and investments, just like we do. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies, Mr. Beal. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business, Mr. Beal. It has been since man crawled out of the slime. And our children will live, Mr. Beal, to see that perfect world in which there's no war or famine, oppression or brutality. One vast and ecumenical holding company for whom all men will work to serve a common profit, in which all men will hold a share of stock, all necessities provided, all anxieties tranquilized, all boredom amused. And I have chosen you, Mr. Beal, to preach this evangel.
Why me?
Because you're on television, dummy. 60 million people watch you every night of the week, Monday through Friday.
I have seen the face of God.
You just might be right, Mr. Beal.
Whoa, extraneous flag. Okay.
Reich marks, rins, rubles, pounds, and shekels.
And shekels. There's a, I think that though, treating capital, treating the economy as an ecosystem, right, as something that's been part of the world since its founding, like
as the natural order of things, to be explicitly
as a religion,
right?
I mean,
yeah.
Like, what happened? And that's why they bring up, like, I have seen the face of God, and he's like, you just might be right. This stability that comes with the financialization of everything, which is why this movie does feel so prescient. Suddenly, financialization is and they mention this multiple times throughout this movie. And hypernormalization mentions this a million times, which is why, like, the things clicked for me, is like this is now a stable system. It actually doesn't need people anymore. There doesn't need to be people anymore. And, so you're dehumanized because this is a stable system that actually takes care of itself as long as there's ebb and flow, as long as nobody disrupts the stability of this. This actually is like a spiritual force for somebody. I mean, you can look at Ned Beatty, but even like somebody like J.P. Morgan, like, you know what I mean? Like early on in kind of the 1890s, when there kind of starts to be these robber barons that have consolidated pretty much every company, which is why it's like, this is like steel or any, you know what I mean? Anything else, like one of these companies, like Andrew Carnegie, like one of these people that has become so rich, they realize that this is a financial system that literally just, we don't need, the only thing that it really needs is labor. Like it's dehumanized you to the point where it is like every man holds a common stock and this financial system takes care of itself. And it's like this spiritual force. Capitalism is a spiritual force. Like all of a sudden, like it doesn't even need the people except as kind of spare parts in an endless system that's creating all of these things, that's creating capital. And of course people get rich at the top, but like, I looking at it like Elon Musk giving the speech about like the future of resource extraction on Mars. Like Mars isn't going to even need really a government. Like
I was going to make a joke about it, but it's like, that's Alien and Aliens, right? Like, it's like, it's the same stuff, but they're just talking about that, but in space.
You have messed with the galactic forces of nature, Mr.
The line he has about there will be no war is kind of interesting because I was thinking about this recently with, a lot of people are saying we're headed towards a new Cold War, the U.S. and China. And what's fascinating to me about that is it's not really going to be like the Cold War we saw in the 20th century. Because,
no way.
Well,
because that's not good for
the
business.
USSR and the USA were blockading each other constantly during the 20th century Cold War.
Yeah,
you can't really do that now because of the financialization of everything and how it's so globalized now.
And the only way that the U.S. functions is cheap products from China.
Yeah.
Like the only way the U.S. economy functions is that we come up with kind of the software, China comes up with the hardware. And I mean, I know that China's done a really good job coming up with their own software, but it's not like we kind of have, like Chinese companies creating this software for us. We have Apple, you know what I mean? We have IBM. We have my brother just started working for IBM, so hearing them name dropped in this was
exactly. We'd like to welcome our new sponsor, IBM. Thank you.
he also and I probably shouldn't say this, but he also had his after hours. He had a job interview with the NSA throughout this time period where he ended up going with IBM. And I was like, dude, I've interviewed Glen Greenwald. I don't think you're going to get a job with the NSA.
Yeah, NSA. Nachos sure are awesome. Right? That's what that stands for?
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. Or
so can I just say that?
Wait, I had not secret ahead. Not secure ahead. Yours is better. Sorry.
Most that's fine. Most movies don't have one memorable monologue. Like I said, this one has at least 4. That's astounding.
And the Ned Beatty one is Oscar now. Like he's
nominated
for supporting actor.
Oscar, as well he should have, because it's freaking awesome. And like,
but it's also like what other movie, what other movie gets Oscar nominated for a 5-minute speech?
Yeah,
he's in the movie before that, but his only line is like, "We've done a good job." You know what I mean? Like
No, I mean it's astounding, and this movie is defies most logic in that way,
and
right?
And this movie kind of in a way that I think like almost the security state and military didn't, like, predicts the fall of the Soviet Union. When he's like, what do you think the Russians talk about in their councils? Karl Marx, they get out their linear programming, statistical decision theories, and Minimax solutions, and compute the price-cost probabilities of their investments and transactions just like we do. I don't think that a lot of the American populace really understood that, like, the Soviet Union was falling to that. You know what I mean? Like, the Soviet Union
Totally.
was falling to capitalism the same way that we are. The Soviet Union was falling to having to, resort to this financialization the same way that we are. I think that you could see it probably, like if you're looking for it, but like, I think that our very foundation, right? Our very foundation of our military state, which is kind of what we are, is like an operating military sales company within a nation, kind of was foundational in not understanding that the Soviet Union was going to fall. The Soviet Union falling was actually catastrophic to what our government was trying to achieve in some ways. And
because we need the military-industrial complex to subsidize the state of Virginia.
I mean,
and we need transactions.
Look, man,
the state of Delaware. Anyway,
I mean, look, man, I'm from Oakland. Oakland literally was kept aloft for at least 4 years by marijuana, and I'm not even kidding. It was marijuana and parking tickets. Those are the two things that actually brought in revenue, and that was before it was municipally legal. That's because it was municipally legal when it was only medicinally legal in the state. So that's how that transpired. But it actually kept the city afloat. So I mean, those are real things. And like, I'm it's joking, but it's serious that like that's how and why these decisions are made, right? Like it's always been that way. And what's crazy is that the quiet part out loud being told, this is like the era that only started to happen. And then what's most amazing, now nobody cares. Everyone's like, oh yeah, of course it is. God damn it.
By the way, Jay Hutch, DM me again. Let's figure out a time that I'm coming on your show.
We should absolutely do After Hours, by the way. After Hours is a great movie. I'll get Rick Valentin for the poster run. It's his favorite movie ever. He's on A Lost, Found, and Rewound, which I guess is stopping. It's like, of course, there's like 3 movie podcasts I listen to, and one of them is stopping. Great. Anyway, whatever.
You are riddled with the primal forces of nature, Mr. Beal, and I won't have it. That speech, the reason that it's so brilliant also from let's take away the content of it, right? Is that as the speech goes on, Ned Beatty, who is an amazing actor, and we talked about him on another This Is Revolution, like we talked about him with Mikey and Nikki, and he was amazing in that too. But
as the ill-advised, sweaty hitman who's very bad at his job and always kind of like out of his element.
Yeah. But like an interesting part about the whole thing is that he kind of switches up his pitch. He switches up kind of the accent that he's using because he's a multinational figure, right? Like it's not like he's suddenly French or something, but like, he switches up from kind of having this voice of God, like almost like slightly British tone to things, to kind of having this normal, like you get up on your 20-inch screen and you howl about America and democracy. So the fact that it's like it's not just a speech that he kind of keeps the same tone for. There's just so many different parts to it, So first he's like this voice of God, and
he brings it down low, and then it gets more conversational. Yeah,
and then he brings it back up again, and it's like terrifying in that way. And the 70s really it feels like the rise of the idea of this multinational corporation. Like okay. No, you go.
I was going to say characterize that with Howard Beal, like with the Howard Beal monologue, where it's not calculating at all. This is a man that like not only has nothing left to lose, has decided that he does not want to be in this world anymore, and then managed to dig up something in himself to like, from hate's heart, I stab at thee. Like level of like dredging something from beneath, that it's all like completely authentic, right? Like, whether you vibe with it or not, it's like whoa, we're literally watching a guy like lose his shit on fucking national television with 60 million people watching. And like that's one of the reasons why both of those monologues are so genius, right? Because they're both so impactful. But like the Ned Beatty one is like, yeah, those are the guys that won. It's the people that like know how to like game it and know how to like bring it up and put it back down. Because look at like the flailing, like later Howard Beal show stuff where he's just like telling people like shit that they don't want to hear and saying that there's no hope anywhere. And everyone's like, oh, people are tuning out now. They don't want to hear that from you. Right. And it's just like, he's like, there isn't any hope. There isn't. And
so I'm just curious. I mean, in a lot of ways, that speech reminds me of that whole idea that Francis Fukuyama had about this is the end of history. It's interesting to me because I've always thought, I don't think we're at the end of history. So I'm curious what you both think of that. Because
I don't think so at all. I think that's a charmingly romantic notion. With the fact that like the reality is
as far as to say it's ideological, although the people who believe in it would say no, we're not ideological at all.
Well, no, but it's the idea.
But that in and of itself is an ideology. Like having this this mindset that is
that everything is based on rational choice theory. I mean, it is an ideology.
I mean, that's a complete ideology.
Fukuyama has had to kind of backtrack on that.
Fukuyama is very interesting because he was one of the early people that early on in the Bush years, he actually went back on that whole book essentially.
And but he's gone back on it a bunch. He's kind of in some ways, from what I understand of his work, and I haven't read a lot of his work, but I've seen interviews he's done. And I watched the beginning of him talking about They Live, which then I was like, I don't fucking care what this guy thinks. But like it feels like he's kind of a social democrat, like in some ways, like in the sense
he's actually called for the return of socialism, by which I mean I think he means social democracy when he says socialism.
No, he's a social democrat. He's not
actively called for the return of that since 2016.
But there is an idea in this movie, and to bring it to this movie, like because I think that on Saturday I hope we can have like a much wider. Which I told
you the idea of keeping this to an hour was a fucking fool's errand, by the way. Like, and you didn't disagree.
Think we were gonna keep it. I didn't think we were gonna keep it.
There's no way. I'm like, there's no way we can get No way.
I need to get off before midnight, so I do have
your
three
problem.
more things.
What you do? I
just have to get my teeth done in the morning, but so I have three more things I want to touch on after this, but I think that it's interesting that the idea of the end of history is kind of the idea that it's not the idea that, history is literally over. It's the idea that we're kind of post-ideological, right? Like we've kind of liberal democracy is the only ideological state that we can ever really achieve. We've reached kind of the pinnacle of human existence. And I want to hear your thoughts on this, JG. So I don't want to be the only one talking for this part of it. This isn't one of the three things I want to talk about, but this kind of, we've reached a point where ideology doesn't really matter anymore at all. You know what I mean? Like we're kind of in a post-ideological state where the only thing that we can really figure out is like how to create the best life for people in some ways, like, and other people are going to be losers to like the neoliberal state, but it's going to be their own fault. And
I mean, that's not working out real well right now.
It wasn't working out real well at the time that the thesis was put out, but like it was this belief that kind of that was the optimal human existence that we could ever possibly have. And I think that the entirety of the speech though that Ned Beatty gives is that like ideology doesn't matter anymore. Like the nature itself, right? Like the fabric of human existence itself is this corporate state. People don't matter. Borders don't matter anymore. Ideology doesn't matter anymore. All that matters at this point is this multinational, currency-driven, primal state of being, where at some point it's going to be that there's going to be overseers, and everyone's just going to be working towards a common profit. And Howard Beal's fucked it up.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I think, a lot of what Ned Beatty's character says, it rhymes with what you hear from people that believe in, I mentioned rational choice theory. And, it's this idea that we're all driven by, rational motivations, and we just need the right incentives. And
it also feels like kind of Wizard of Oz-ish.
Well, I guess rational choice proponents would respond and say, well, we're working with a model. We're not saying that this is the absolute truth, but it turns into almost like a religious belief. And really, I don't know how to respond to those things anymore, because we're obviously, I think people are shaped by their habitus, to borrow a term from Pierre Bourdieu, the French sociologist. We're shaped by our experiences, and we're not necessarily motivated by rationality or rational incentive systems.
Yeah, I don't know anyone that is that way.
Well, it's bizarre, because
I know people that think that they're that way, but they're just as ideal.
Yeah, exactly. They're just as
the claim they are.
Else. I mean, I would say rational choice theorists are idealists. And I mean,
sure.
It's interesting because Francis Fukuyama was deeply influenced by Hegel, who I would say was an idealist. And of course, Marx tried to materialize Hegel, but Hegel himself, that's idealism. So
Catherine Hegel is very hot. Yes, I agree.
But you like, I don't know. I feel like within the whole idea of all of this, you have like the idea of post ideology, right? Like, and I mean, there are people right now that are like, oh, I'm post left, which is a bullshit term that just means like, socially conservative, fiscally, not wanting to be.
I think people that think we're post ideology that sincerely believe that are delusional.
But you have hometown hero of mine, Andrew Yang. Not really, he has his second house in New Paltz, but I've seen him going into the vegan restaurant. But
he's like at best a regulatory capitalist with the idea of a common social safety net.
He just kind of had he not even a common. He's kind of a.
But before his mayor's run, like that was like the whole idea, and like again, props to him for bringing UBI into the environment.
Like it's the tech is going to take over everything, and
except for the fact that UBI is not considered a American libertarian concept. In Europe, it's considered a conservative value.
Well,
trait,
I mean, there are is a proponent of UBI. Like
there's major libertarians in the U.S. that like the idea of UBI.
Well, absolutely, but that's
Freeman supported it, and Murray.
Yeah, because the idea is ultimately it supports a capitalist
wipe out the welfare state. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But because that data is UBI as an alternative prescription towards what's considered these social programs that are inherently flawed in the eyes of the people in question. But like ultimately, Yang is hilarious in the fact that like many dudes that are smart but not quite as smart as they think they are, like he thinks he's above it all. It's like, dude, you were so not above.
The thing about Yang that I respect is that when he walks into a vegan restaurant, he's wearing the merch for his own podcast, because his podcast, I guess.
Does he do that?
I told you this, I think, but when I was getting ready for one of our episodes, Yang lives in New Paltz, which is
okay,
which is a very small town, and he's walking to the vegan restaurant, and it was 2 weeks after, and you were on the episode, I think. When I saw
this,
he wore a Yang Speaks T-shirt around town 2 weeks after he lost the mayoral race to worst cop in the NYPD, Eric Adams. Not in a has brutalized people way, but just in a like bumbling cop.
In a way that we will, if there's a Democratic presidential primary in 2024, you can guarantee that motherfucker's running in the most like tone deaf sort of way that the other, as New York City mayors tend to do. Let's put it that way. I'm not going to mention the guy's name.
All I gotta say about
I'd liked De Blasio. I thought De Blasio was a much better mayor than what Eric Adams is going to be.
Andy Cohen disagreed about that on New Year's.
So sidebar to a sidebar. I love that when De Blasio endorsed Bernie, he's like, "Yeah, sure, fine, whatever." It was it was amazing. I love that. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, there was also the Tom Steyer thing, right? Tom Steyer tried to shake his hand. He's like, "Yeah, good,
sure, okay." Yeah. And
But
here's the fucked up thing though. Steyer has way more cred than fucking de Blasio does. Because Steyer, before he had the ill-advised thing of, and I know this because Steyer was a force in California politics for the direct democracy propositions, which are fucking ridiculous and been hijacked by billionaires. But Steyer, as one of the quote unquote good billionaires, like, he actually pushed a lot of good propositions and did like more political good than frankly Gavin Newsom or like most of the other people that people have fucking jerk off to themselves over that are California politicians. But that motherfucker never should have been running for president. Nobody was looking for that. Nobody was looking for that. And so people only think of it as like this goofy ass dude. It's like, wow, you did so much good work and that just doesn't matter now. Like, people are like, yeah, you're the guy that like tried to hang out with Bernie, and he was like, yeah, sure, okay.
Hey,
that's
Bernie.
all people remembers from you.
Hey,
and your doofy ties.
Can I shake your hands? Yeah, good. Okay. The thing that I fucking respect about de Blasio, is that he was just so unpopular throughout his term as mayor that when something like COVID hit, he was willing to just be like, no, I just need to say, like, you need to be vaccinated to go into restaurants.
Yeah. What are they gonna do? Dislike me? They already.
Yeah. And he was willing to like appoint some people that were like, you know, ended up breaking with him, like Mile Wiley or whatever, like that. But he still kind of he was willing to make unpopular decisions because nobody was ever gonna like him. No one was ever gonna like de Blasio, which is why it's ridiculous. I almost said a word that I shouldn't. Ridiculous that he ran for president because no one in New York City ever liked de Blasio. But when it comes to something unpopular like vax requirements to get into a restaurant, that's the only person that could do it. Eric Adams is already backtracking on everything de Blasio did because he's like, oh, I'm going to be a popular mayor. And it's like, number one, no, you're not. That is not a job that anyone can win at. Mayor is the worst job you can have. Number two, I don't think you fucking believe in COVID. You're a fucking NYPD expert. Anyway, bring us back to network. I wanted to play the Sidney Lumet clip that we couldn't play. And then I have a couple things to bring up. And then, you know,
I have one more comment after the Lumet clip too. But
yeah. Is it Lumet? I've said Lumet my entire life. Is it really Lumet?
I don't know. I just assumed he was French. But I'm not going to stop everyone else from talking for the rest of it. I just had a couple of points I wanted to bring up, and then I need to go to bed because I have to get, you know, probably teeth out of my head tomorrow.
Oh, do you? It's only the 7th time you said that, so.
I am very afraid of dentists, bro. Don't dentist shame me on my own podcast. I've been anxious about it all day.
Coming up next, Little Shop of Horrors.
The fascinating things about Patty is that he writes a character whose protest becomes a byword today. I mean, it's in the language. I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. What I love is that Howard Beal does absolutely nothing about it. There's no action from then on in. He only continues with something which began before he made that speech, because it's when he's still in his normal anchorman's clothes and when he's still comparatively sane that he says, I just got tired of the bull. So he starts telling the truth before that scene. He's clearly in a psychotic state in that scene. He's left the house in his pajamas and a raincoat, walking through a thunderstorm to come do his broadcast. So that nothing changes in Howard Beal when he says, I'm mad as hell, I'm not going to take it anymore. And one of the brilliances in the writing of that movie was that Patty would never be sentimental enough to make a difference. He has an audience out there which shouts along with the announcer, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And that becomes as stupid and duplicitous as anything else. And Howard is yelling at them, you're not serial, you're not fake, we're the ones who are fake. And they sit there and he goes into a fit and falls on the ground and they cheer. And when he gets shot, they cheer. The audience doesn't change. Howard doesn't change. Bill Holden loses his erection and goes back, wants to go back to his wife. God knows if she'll take him, but fundamentally doesn't change. The Faye Dunaway character, when he says to her, you're the television generation, you learned life from Bugs Bunny, one of the great lines. And he says, you're heartless, Diana. And he leaves her. And I had said to Faye, when I first met her, I walked into her living room and she was seated on a couch all the way across the living room. And I said, I know what the first question is going to be from you. And that you're going to ask me, where's her vulnerability? And I'm going to tell you right now, she has none. And if you try to get any in, I'll cut it out of the movie. And when Bill Holden said that to her, and I said to her specifically, I said, Faye, you got to remember our first conversation. If I see any tear brimming when I'm shooting your reaction, brimming in your eye, I won't use it. I'm warning you. And she got exactly what I meant. And she played the exactly perfect thing, which was, I don't know what you're talking about.
That's fucking awesome. By the way, let's listen together. I looked it up, right?
Sidney Lumet.
That sucks.
Sidney Lumet.
Lumet. That's way less cool than Lumet.
It's like when Stephen Colbert went on Bill O'Reilly and he said, little Stephen Colbert. It's like I looked around and everyone in your hometown called him Stephen Colbert.
Sidney Lumet.
Stephen Colbert.
Yeah, that sucks. I mean, that's like I got super pissed off when that I found out that primer is only primer in English, like UK English, and it's primer here. I'm like, that's fucking dumb. It should be the other way around.
Well, I spell gray the with the A. I spell it the UK way.
Like Jean Grey?
No, the word gray.
Oh, G-R-A. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
We spell it G-R-E-Y, which I fucking hate. And then, they spell it G-R-A-Y. And, you're looking that up now. I'm telling you they do.
I believe you. Hey,
I don't think you believe me.
how awesome is it that, like, he wanted to be that, like, unemotional and soulless? And, like, that's great. I love that.
Character doesn't work.
The key to the character,
right? Like,
no, it would suck if like she had some like, oh, that hurts me. This is happening. Like, no, it has to be that emotion is unknown to her. Not that she's like asshole. Not that she's like evil. She's just absent of, like, she's calculating.
Well, the thing that I think really
it's a banal evil, if it's
really, really works about that character is that in small doses, it's like an incredibly charming character. Like, I mean, and a lot of that is Faye Dunaway. But like,
I have straight up dated that woman. Yes, 100% agree.
in tiny doses at the beginning of it, right, where she's kind of just watching something and she's like, "Oh, we need to change things up." Like, if you just kind of had one meeting with that character, you're like, "This is like a charming kind of person." And then when you realize,
that's awesome.
When you realize that she is like the perfect neoliberal subject because she's so consumed by her PMC existence, and it's a creative PMC existence. Like, when you realize that she's so consumed by her job as programming chief that's literally she's just fucking, and all she can talk about is TV. And William Holden's like Max character is just like kind of trying to find a connection with her and can't. And at the beginning of the movie, this is one of the three things I want to talk about. The beginning of the movie, when he's talking to Howard Beal, and he says, "I love it. Suicides, assassinations, mad bombers, mafia hitmen, automobile smash-ups, the death hour. Great Sunday night show for the whole family. We'll blow Disney out of the water." Like, he says that, and you're like, "Oh, this is the bad boy of TV at this time." You know what I mean? Like, you're like, this is
he means it as a joke. He means it as like, like, I'm taking this like the most certain. She's like, "Yep,
Yeah, but in my mind, when I first saw that, and they've been friends for a long time, and it's like he's trying to help Howard Beal out, but then he like feels like vamping, which it seems like a lot of his character is just vamping with other characters or like riffing. You know what I mean? Like just kind of like going back and forth, which I like a lot because I love that that's like the old Hollywood thing where it's like you kind of have just some line and the other person has a line. But it seems like, oh, maybe that's like the bad boy of this classical era of TV where it's like, wow, like he loves it. And then you realize like, no, like the Diana character, Faye Dunaway, is 100% serious about that, number one.
Yeah.
But number two, like scares the shit out of him because of that. You know what I mean? Because there is no morality to it. And he's the only character in the room that when, when Howard Beal kind of has his mental break where it does seem like, suddenly it's like, oh no, like this person should not be on TV. Because at first it's like he's upset, he's depressed, which we've all been depressed. We've all felt like the world is ending and there's no real point to it. And, and I think that feeling has pervaded for the last 4 decades. And this is kind of the beginning of this understanding that a lot of this stuff is meaningless. But like for someone who's been on TV that's like, oh, I'm going to blow my brains out. He's like, well, the Max character is like, life is bullshit. Like, this is all bullshit. Like, we're being taken over. Like, this is bullshit. I feel that way too. And then allows Howard Beal to go on TV. But then the moment that he kind of stops is the moment where suddenly like Howard Beal is like, oh, I've talked to God. And it's like, oh, all right. This is someone that actually is mentally breaking down.
My friend and compatriot is around the bend. Right.
Yeah, and that's when Diana's like, no, we've taken over for you. Maybe he really does. And that she doesn't, that there's no part of her that believes that there is a God. There's nothing outside of the voice talking to her on TV. You know what I mean? Like, and maybe at that point, you don't necessarily know it's that bad for her, but you're like, oh shit, like this is the person that at first seemed like maybe they're kind of like the TV badass. That's like the death hour. And you're watching him pitch this. And you're like, like this is funny. And this is good, like content ideas. But you see someone that's like, no, this is my content idea. Like, this isn't a joke for me. The death hour. That's a great idea. He's sitting in the room, and you forget that he's there, but he's sitting in the room when they're watching the footage of the great Ahmed Khan. And
I feel like, you guys remember the show the Beavis and Butthead spinoff Daria? I feel like Diana's the character that would have been pitching episodes of what was the show she always watched? Sick World or something like that.
Well, the first episode that I had Conan, and Jason on was Sorry to Bother You. We talked about that, and we talked about Blind Spotting, and they have the I got the shit kicked out of me show. You know what I mean? And then you see fucking Cassius Green covered in literal shit. You know what I mean? Like, but like it's the same kind of idea that you have like this violent outburst, and you have like Danny Glover's character who does seem to understand how the world works. That's still like he has the I got the shit kicked out of me shirt. It's like I love it. Like, you know what I mean? Like even that character is like, I understand that this world that I'm living in is so perverse, but like at the same time, I still have the I got the shit kicked out of me shirt. I still get entertained by that. And this movie kind of made me feel like, the Howard Beal character is obviously trying to appeal to them and saying like, turn off your television, turn off your television, turn off your television. But then you watch the Patty Chayefsky clip that we watched, and he's like, no, listen, I'm entertained by television. Like television's entertaining. I just, I want people to know that they're profiting off of it. Like, that's all I really want people to know. Like, it's not that I don't watch TV. Like, I watch it and it's fun to watch it, but like, I want people just to know it's fun.
I felt like in that clip, they were straw manning so much. They're like, you're just brutally attacking television. I'm like, well, if he was brutally attacking television that much, why is he even on the TV with you right now?
There's a really funny moment that I cut out because it would have added like a minute to it. And I didn't, we only had an hour, but there's a really funny moment. I'll send you the interview where he makes this really amazing quip where he says that he was at a place and like some of the actors were there, and he had like dehumanization. Like they said, oh well, my car is there. Like they identified them by their car, and someone else said, "Oh, my Mercedes" or something, and the guy that was sitting next to them is like, "Oh, well, you don't want to say that to Germans or something." And it was like this really funny like moment that was obviously like a Holocaust joke between the two of them, and I was like, "Oh, fuck." but it was like it was well placed.
I mean, the thing that
I don't know.
Why did we change?
What happened there?
I don't know.
Is the NSA fucking with our feed?
I think
was there a glitch in the Matrix? What happened?
Primal forces of nature, Mr. Beal.
So the thing
and
that
God won't have it.
Wait, what? I mean, I feel like the William Holden and what the fuck? What's happening right now? I feel like the William Holden and Peter Finch characters, I appreciated the most recent time I've seen it, which is maybe the 12th time I've seen this movie. It's my favorite movie of all time. And I appreciated aspects of their friendship that I didn't understand. That I didn't maybe that I understood before, but I didn't quite appreciate. Like how protective Max is over Howard, right? Howard, he doesn't want Howard to be exploited. He doesn't want Howard to quote unquote make a fool of himself, but he doesn't want him to be exploited either. And like that's why, you know, like look, I kicked off the episode of it, you know, with the quote, but like, you know, like be the mad prophet of the. Okay, now I'm just getting dizzy. You know, like that exchange of between the two of them is so freaking great because it's just like it's hilarious, right? I mean, it's a hilarious moment because it's what's it, Kitty on the Square, right? And that's I don't know, I'm gonna get nauseous if we keep moving around these screens.
Those last two are me, and I was just fucking with everything.
Well, congratulations. I feel really proud of yourself. But like I'd like to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisy of our times, right? Would you like to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisy of your times? I think I would like to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisy of our times. Oh, then you should do like, and they say the whole thing out and is like, and is like, go get it, basically. Right. And like, that's sort of like him acknowledging that his friend, his lifelong friend that he came up in this world with, is finding a purpose, even if he doesn't like it, understand it, or condone it, and ultimately thinks it's going to end in failure. But like, this is the same lifelong friend that he went on a bender with, who literally said, "I am going to kill myself." No, don't say that. No, I'm going to do that. I mean, why do you think he tells that same story about like, you know, going to like to, you know, take me to the middle of the George Washington Bridge. No, don't do it. It's not worth it, buddy. Like he tells that joke, that allegory, that tale, like multiple times over. And like, I used to wonder why he did that. But then if you look at from a larger context of like, these are dudes that have spent a lot of time together. And he honestly wants his friend to live to the point that he has him like crash at his place, right? Which is what leads him to like just running around with the raincoat coming in, you know, hair plastered down, like looking like a mental escapee from the mental asylum. I'm sure that's not the right term, but like the iconic Howard Beal look where he makes the speech, but he's just trying to look out for his friend to keep him around.
Well, they're the last two giants of a dying industry that's going into its next phase, and
nobody has any optimism for that's in it.
Yeah,
like right, it's like they know that it's like,
and it makes
the meteor is hitting the Earth that is causing the extinction of all of them.
It's the same reason that when the head of the organization kind of dies, you know, Howard Beal makes the speech where he's like, well, what does it matter if one old white man dies? You know what I mean? Like dies. Like, well, it matters because all of a sudden we're going to be further consolidated because this is kind of one of the last people that were existing within my phase of existence. Which, I mean, I wanted to talk to both of you guys about this on this Revolution episode, and we didn't get to it, but like there is the moment, and it's for the best. Like but like Walter Cronkite, who's the person that he's next to at the beginning of the movie and the end of the movie, when there's the talking heads, kind of meddles with the primal forces of Vietnam, Mr. Beal, and you know, and I think that it is for the best. Like, we should not have been in Vietnam. It's an imperialist war. It's absolutely, horrifying. But there is this moment where suddenly, you expect that somebody on TV isn't going to have an agenda, and whether it's a good agenda or a bad agenda, you suddenly find that, like Walter Cronkite's like, oh, we should get out of this war. And so the same kind of statement about like an editorial comment, and they bring up, instead of bringing up Walter Cronkite, they bring up Howard Brinkley, who
Christy Brinkley,
not Christy Brinkley.
No,
but they bring up like
it's a different kind of show.
David Brinkley's like comments at at the DNC, where it's like they have their own editorial. David Brinkley has his own editorial comments on multiple DNC whatever, and they might be good, they might be bad. I only really have read them in Rick Perlstein's books, to bring back our good friend who actually
bring back their sponsor.
How much is he paying?
I was gonna interview him, and then I stopped working for Ben a day before we had him on, which I was Ben had not read all 4 of his books. I had read all 4 of his books and read 2 of them multiple times, and it didn't end up happening, and I ended up having to figure out other shit. But like Rick Perlstein kind of decodes a lot of David Brinkley's DNC commentary. And it's like, everybody has their editorial comment. And, you could look at the same way, though, with the New York Times, right? You can look at the same way with a lot of different things, where it's like, listen, their reporting might be accurate. Their reporting might be kind of, in some ways, nonpartisan. But then all of these different newspapers have op-eds. And the op-eds are suddenly, when something with the New York Times, treated the same way as reporting, which it's not. It's somebody giving you their opinion. And it's someone who probably has a shitload of money tied up in something, right? Like when someone goes, hey, this is my op-ed about the Iraq war, like, and it's the New York Times, it's most likely someone who has like, despite the fact that they might be excluding a lot of things, right? Which is what, mainstream papers do. Like, all of a sudden, like, it also might be that someone has a bunch of money in a certain conflict, and it's like, hey, this is my commentary on the conflict, without telling you that they have a bunch of money in it. And it's the same kind of thing with editorial comment in news shows. It's like the op-edification, I guess, that you would call it.
But this is also, this forestalls and kind of shows the genesis of a lot of that, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's sort of like the fictional beginning of it is like, the mad prophet, the preacher with his gun in his hand sort of like mindset, whatever. But in reality is far more mundane and insidious, which is sort of like,
I mean, it's not even because they say, Cronkite has his editorial, Brinkley has his, why can't Howard Beal?
But the thing is, those editorials were sort of like, hey, maybe we're not right being in Vietnam, right? Whereas as opposed to like, you have to get up and shout, I'm a human being, my life has value. That's a little bit, obviously that's like, the narrative structure of this is that goes a little bit further. That's more of like a, 2022 sentiment.
No, and listen,
which is why it still fucks.
I'm not saying it's the same thing. It's not. It's an escalation.
No, but you're talking about it like, exactly. You're talking about the idea of like the dawn of like, not these trusted figures, all men, all of a certain age, like that were like there's a trust to them. These are the people that tell you the news that at a certain point feel that they have to speak out about something.
Well, I'm not. I mean, it's not just me talking. The movie itself, right? Like,
no, that comes from the movie, but also that turned into the infotainment and opinion industrial complex.
Yeah, and which is something that Patty Chayefsky seems to very much understand is going to happen, and which is like, when people say, oh, he's prescient, he understands our economic system, he understands, like, no, what he understands is that this is the thing that's beginning, and this is the thing that I think very much is beginning. I think that we've had this conversation with Fox, and we've had this conversation MSNBC, and then CNN. CNN kind of is the first 24-hour news outlet, and I was just listening to Blowback today when they're talking about, like, the Gulf War, 20 years after this movie comes out, right? Like, really. Like, well, I guess 15 years after this movie comes out, technically, because it's 1976, and that's 1990. But like 15 years after this movie comes out, you know, the first movie to really be not live covered because the military is communicating with CNN, live covered because they're doing 24-hour a day like coverage. You know what I mean? Like
embeds. Yeah.
Like, and it doesn't matter what you say about it. It just matters that you're the one person that's kind of capable of you know, covering this. And
you don't have to get it right. You just have to get there first.
Yeah. No, 100%. And you know, since then they've hired like I think Jeff Zucker, the former ESPN guy that literally has said, hey, we need to cover news the same way they cover sports because sports are the most watched thing, which it's understandable why they are. Like, why wouldn't you watch a shitload of sports? I mean, I've never necessarily been a sports person, but like, you know, there's two teams. One of the teams is the one you're rooting for. The other team is the one you're not. Like, there's the stakes to that are just like, listen, it's my state or my area versus your area. Of course, I'm going to root for mine. But when it comes to like, it's my country versus your country, of course, I'm going to root for mine. Like, it's understandable why there would be the jump to that. But at the same time, like, that's insidious. That's insidious as fuck. The last thing that I wanted to bring up before we end is I wanted to talk again about the Liberation Armies and the Angela Davis character, and kind of the way that I wanted to get both of you guys' opinion, and this will be, I guess, this version of Final Thoughts. You know, I wanted to hear both of you guys' thoughts on the way that kind of this media system has subsumed any kind of anti-capitalist resistance. And I think the perfect time to kind of cover that is, of course, during the New Left failure, right? Like, there's a moment post-Vietnam War that's kind of a failure of, you know, there's the idea of like Abby Hoffman, where it's like you can go on TV and your TV protest is the same thing as a regular protest. Media coverage, cultural coverage is the same thing as any other kind of resistance. And I think that that's been thoroughly disproved. But this movie kind of shows really well how it's disproved. So I'm going to shut up.
Well, I think the fact that, who was it? Jerry Rubin became like a Republican later on. You know, I have some time for Abby still. I got a lot out of Abby Hoffman when I was younger. But a lot of some of those yippies actually ended up becoming yuppies. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I have still this book with invisibility of this desk, and it's funny when you mentioned that. Yeah, I did not in fact steal it. I bought it for 25 cents at the thrift store, by the way.
When I was listening today to The Invisible Bridge, the Rick Perlstein book.
God damn it! Enough about Rick Perlstein. God damn it!
Because it really does a good
Unless
job.
He's coming on the show, I don't want to fucking hear about it.
No, but he does a good job of aestheticizing the feeling after Watergate, right? Like, I can either turn to him or Adam Curtis, and Adam Curtis is just usually BBC footage. So like, so turning to him, like, it kind of does a really good job explaining, like, even how Abby Hoffman's dad, who's like kind of a Republican, this like guy living in Middle America, during the Watergate coverage goes, oh, maybe my son was right. Like, this media spectacle, right? Like, in the words of Two Holes Infrared, that guy, it's all a spectacle. That, you know, like that kind of assumption about left politics at that time. All right. Well, if no one else has anything to say about
not on that. No, I mean, like, look, if you want to talk about subjectivism and like get down to the weeds on that, great, let's go. But like, ultimately, like, I think we very adequately covered like the commodification of the spectacle, in this case Howard Beal, where the content doesn't matter and it's very, very much repackaged in a way that's easily palatable and commodified to the point that you have, like, you know, the crowd cheering his like catchphrase, you know, like the equivalent of the "Did I do that?" of like 1976, right? And like, Look at the Bill Hicks bit, right? He's going for the anti-marketing.
You know what
dollar.
I think of when I think
good
of
market? That's a good dollar. No, I'm not doing that, you assholes. Oh, that's very, very smart. He's doing it. He's doing the anti.
When I think of the Mao Zedong Hour bit in Network, I think now about how, I've seen shows on, say the Hill, or shows like Rising, where it's like, we're going to bring on these two alt media personalities who have a beef with each other. They're going to yell at each other for about 5 minutes.
Brianna Joy Gray and Chomsky.
Well, I'm not going to name names. I don't want to, hurt feelings, whatever. But I mean,
didn't bring them both on. I was just picking two random ones.
And I mean, so much of the media sphere is now driven by, it's kind of like, especially in the alt media, it's Vidal versus Buckley all the way down.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't call Rising alt media. I would call Rising.
Well, no, but it doesn't matter if it's Rising or not. What he's talking about is like, instead of being Buckley,
I know. I was ramming towards something. Jeez. But I think that the point of Rising is something kind of insidious. It is the point of ramping these contradictions up. And I think there's certain shows like, like Brianna Joy Gray's Bad Faith, where she has people on and talks about certain things, that the point of it isn't the spectacle, although she ends up utilizing the spectacle to market her show. I think the point of it really is these disagreements and kind of breaking them down. Whereas with something like The Hill, I think the point of it really is creating this kind of idea of like a very cable news idea of these, populist right, populist left.
I'll put it another way then. I really don't care about like what beef Cenk Uygur and Aaron Matei have with each other, but there's a lot of like YouTube channels and alt media people that will literally devote entire segments of their show to
they do it like the
latest alt media people beefing.
They do it like TMZ, like there's progressive.
Yeah, it is like TMZ. Yeah. And I'm not trying to say like, I'm not trying to diss anyone, but
no, but like there's channels like Progressive Voice that cover it like TMZ. Like there's channels that exploit the fuck out of it that way. I did want to touch on the idea of Lorene Hobbs, like that last bit of it, where it seems like, and we see this now all the fucking time, like this idea of like citizen journalism, right? Like InfoWars does it constantly. This is the last. Apparently I got kicked off Twitch for some reason, but this kind of InfoWars style of journalism, where it's because I think maybe This Revolution went back on somehow, but
I was gonna say, I thought you said Cracker. Oh.
Oh no, you're kicked off your channel now.
I guess what do we mean by citizen journalism?
No, like this idea of like citizen journalism, right? Like this liberation army film stuff themselves, and all of a sudden, like in this case, I think you wouldn't. It's a little bit different because I'm live again apparently, but citizen journalism is a little bit different in that case because like you still need kind of cable news. But like we're kind of at a point now, right, where you don't need cable news anymore, and you just kind of need, you just need the internet to. So, but it would seem like something like the Ecumenical Liberation Army, right, taking footage of their own bank robbery. All of a sudden, like you don't, if you wanted to pass out footage of that, right, like you don't necessarily need cable news to cover that. You have your own footage, and people start wondering like, oh, well, they're covering their own thing. They can sell it at some kind of leverage or something. And then all of a sudden it's subsumed by UBS, which is a hilarious name for a cable network, by the way, because it's really just.
I was gonna say, I was thinking more in terms of like advocacy journalism, because I mean, there's been issues with advocacy journalism now, where you have like the famous example is Malcolm Gladwell, who I still think he has probably the most punchable face I've ever seen.
Don't ever say that name on this podcast again.
What? You like Malcolm Gladwell?
No, I meant I don't.
Don't say it again. Okay. He'll appear.
Okay. So he literally should not be named Voldemort.
He tries to sell gambling. He tries to sell like gambling companies and laundry detergents to people.
Yeah. Well, the big one was I think he was working with Big Tobacco, you know, and Yasha Levine.
With everything,
yeah,
he's literally something like Chomsky, where it's like the idea of a public intellectual, right? Like a professor that's taught somewhere. And I don't like the idea of someone like I like Chomsky a lot, and I like Zizek a lot, but I don't like the idea of public intellectuals. I don't like the idea of like, you're like, hey, something's happened in the world, let me turn to this intellectual who it's not their subject. It's not. They have no expertise in it. So you're like turning to someone, you're like, what do you think about this smart guy who works at a college? And Malcolm Gladwell has taken that idea and then gone, let me try to figure out how I can sell laundry detergent. Bill Nye has kind of done the same thing, but he's not attached to a college. So like, whatever. It's like, let me see how I can sell somebody like a product while also using this public intellectual thing, which is of course where that was going to go. Stop asking these people. Ask somebody qualified. Which, you know, I love Chomsky, so I don't. He answered my email one time, but it's just like the idea of a fully rounded person and that can answer all these questions is ridiculous. Once again, I almost used another word that I shouldn't have, so I'm happy I didn't. Ridiculous is a better word than what I was thinking. Well, you know,
I literally just started typing Bill Hicks bits into the chat at one point, but they're all still more as relevant as when I typed them 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's weird since you mentioned the whole citizen journalism thing, and then you mentioned Alex Jones. You know what's weird to me is, so I mean, the media communications is my specialty. That's what I went to uni for. I can hear people giving a collective groan now, but I think it's given me an insight on a lot of things because I don't think people realize, like, to me, I don't even look at like Alex Jones as a journalist. He's like a carny entertainer. Like, yeah. You know, I'm
not trying to call Alex Jones.
What's interesting is we're at such a point right now where there's study after study showing that people can't tell the difference between an ad and an actual news article.
That's why we covered night morality on this show.
Yeah.
No, but no. So all right, citizen journalism is a very specific thing. It is like people like Andy No or whatever, like that kind of like that shows up to like a protest or something with a camera, or like Tim Pool, like that like what Tim Pool started out doing, not what he's doing now. But no, it's grown worthy. But they show up with cameras to certain events, and they take a video of it, and then they upload the video, and it's like, oh, this person's kind of a citizen journalist. Same thing with like, I mean, I guess, you know, not so much since when he got hired by TYT, but like Michael Tracy, like the same kind of thing, right? Like you take a camera to a protest and you film it and then you put it online, and it's like, we don't have to trust media companies anymore, which all these people are working for media companies, but like you trust like a citizen journalist. They come there with a camera. See, they've got their phone out.
I see what you're saying. I mean, I've known,
but that's what the Ecumenical Liberation Army was kind of doing in this, right? Like they bring their own camera. They bring their own camera.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
They film. So the point that I was trying to make before we get off, because I do have to go to sleep because, you know, never mind. But no, like,
yeah, you keep bringing up new subjects, so.
I am a public dentist intellectual. But no, but like they brought a camera, right? You don't necessarily need a media company. You can somehow find a way to distribute your own thing and say, this is what we were trying to do. This is our thing. And it's the same thing that, like, I mean, you look at something like, you know, however you feel about it, like, well, I mean, obviously everyone feels terrible about it, is the existence of it, but like the idea that like a terrorist group, like even ISIS or Al Qaeda can, you know, publish like what live stream an act of terror, and you're in some ways a lot of times I'm like, listen, if they're live streaming it, I don't necessarily think that, like, fully think that some of these acts of terror are really coming from the place they are, because it's like, who the fuck sets up a camera and goes, okay, act of terror, you know, I'm Steve-O and this is my act of terror and this is Jackass, and then sets that up. But it, you know, because that does seem like a media spectacle, but like you think like, oh well, why does, like, you know, UBS really need to be involved with that? And all of a sudden subsuming it within the, like, so that it's not just a news story, or it's not just something else. It's all of a sudden kind of a reality show, like an early reality show, 2 decades before reality shows exist. Like, This is our terrorism reality show. This is our Liberation Army reality show. This is our Mao Zedong hour. Like, it's prescient as fuck.
No, I see what you mean now, because I guess my initial thought was, I mean, citizen journalism as an idea, in theory, I don't have an issue with it. I've known people like Jenna Orkin is a really good citizen journalist. She was in New York after 9/11 covering the deadly dust, the asbestos in the air after.
Look at even Abby Martin. I mean, still, but like, you know, like Abby Martin's whole
Abby Martin's completely independent now. Yeah, like, I mean, there are citizen journalists who do a lot of good work.
Coverage, and she's one of the few people that hasn't, you know, subsumed to the same like libertarian version of a leftist ideology. I remember she came on TMBS and was asked about Tulsi Gabbard, who I think is like the ultimate, like, you know, citizen journalist candidate, in the sense of like, hey, don't we hate war, folks, while also being part of this, you know, incredibly incentivized right-wing media force. You know,
I don't think she's as anti-war as people claim either. That's
but the point is that, you know, Abby Martin came on TMBS and was asked, do you think Tulsi Gabbard's anti-war? And she was like, no, that doesn't like go with our version of anti-war, like where you're just literally showing up, but like literally going to show up to somewhere and literally just covering something that, you know, the Israeli army is doing because you're like, this is a horrific war crime, and not because it's like this is some kind of political justification for certain policies that you support. Like, this is a completely different thing. And I remember Michael was like, oh my God, thank God. But like, you know, that kind of citizen journalism, I'm 100% in favor of.
But what gets out there and what people know about is Andy Ngo, Tim Pool, and they know about all this. I mean, it's culture war.
Two examples I did.
I hate them so much.
I do too. But you know,
they make it's sad, because like, I think that's one of the things that's really prescient about the film is we don't talk about, so many people don't talk about like what I consider, and maybe I'm wrong for thinking this way, but like, to me, the issue of the Saudi arms deal last month that went through, even though the majority of the American public in polls said they were against it. That was a big issue to me, and I think that's an issue of import. Where are tax dollars going, right? But instead, we're talking about whatever the latest controversy has you know, drummed up in his mind.
I don't like that CCA is being sold to the Saudis. Billions of dollars.
Well, yeah, no, it's exactly like a network. Like, we get these distractions instead of talking about like the issues that, you know, can actually affect us on a national level.
And you get these distractions in a corporate sense, right? Like, that's kind of what Howard Beal is doing at first, where it's like, don't you know that they're like, everything's consolidating? And it's like, listen, now, I went to college for media studies. You know what I mean? Like, took classes in that. Like, they're like, everything's consolidating. It's like, there's nothing you can really do about it. The only time that they're really like, that it really affects the Robert Duvall character and everyone else in that company is when he's like, hey, stop the deal from happening. Here's a very specific political action. Let's all do that. And then they're like, oh, fuck. We need to like pretty much kill this guy at the end of this movie. You know what I mean? Like, it's, I don't know. But
and it's as matter of fact as any decision that you would make for the other side.
Well, and I think that it also plays into the fact that, and this is the last thing that I'll say before, and I'll give you guys final thoughts before we get off. But like, it also plays into the fact that, you know, the church committee happened within the same kind of time period, and it's like an understanding that, you know, something like Guatemala happened with the United Fruit Company, and it's kind of assuming that these companies would eventually just say, you know what, we don't actually need something like the CIA to do this for us. Let's just assassinate someone on our own. Like, if our profits are threatened, if we feel like this isn't helping us and the person in charge isn't helping us, why don't we just assassinate this person on our own? We have people on our payroll that are capable of assassinating this person on our own. And it's kind of the same way that Malcolm X was assassinated, right? Like, you can just kind of blame, like, oh, this is the Mao Zedong people, or this is the Nation of Islam people. Like, you can just kind of blame that and be like, listen, there's a lot of radicals out there that are just willing to shoot somebody, I guess.
I was going to say too, and maybe this will, I'm trying to word this right, but even even issues that I consider important or that have a significance, I think, and reflect something back about our culture and our society and problems within it. Even those issues now get talked about in like these weird, like dramatic terms, as if we're in a Star Wars movie. I think it's very important to talk about January 6th of last year, that whole deal. But I also don't want to talk about it in like flowery terms,
Anniversary.
like having a Star Wars movie.
Yeah, it was sedition, and the prescription for that is to be hanged. The end. That's the end of it. So people worried about like, oh, they got such a harsh jail sentence. You know what it says in the documents this country's allegedly founded on? That those people should be hanged. And they were like, say what you want about the founding fathers. Did they own slaves? Yup. Were they like not cool with like women and like people that were not other white dudes? Nope, they were not cool with that at all. But they said that sedition, there was one prescriptive solution to that. So I'm sorry. Oh, you know, the mad prophet of the QAnon got a harsh sentence. I'm sorry. Did he get hanged? Sounds like he got fucking off easy.
For me, I'm just thinking of it in terms of like January 6th is a bad penny, man. Like it's
sure.
I think like when you
gotta politicize it, JG.
When you have this level of loss of trust in institutions and people doing things like they did on January 6th, it's reflective of broader problems in the society, and we have to keep, looking at like what is causing the symptoms.
We're probably going to get into a long January 6th conversation on Sabbath.
I'll keep it for that.
Yeah,
but.
so
I'm how you guys celebrate? I'm getting a keg. How about you guys?
I'm going to the dentist.
Oh, are you? Yeah. I hadn't heard. Yeah.
I guess my basic point was it's horrifying that we talk about everything as if we're in some type of Star Wars movie or a movie that Diana from Network would love to watch.
You know what? I met two of my best friends because of January 6th. Barn and Gene Bajelon. I knew who they were, but we were on a panel just covering January 6th.
Can we just mention those bros were counter programming and having their own episode while we did this? So first of all, how dare you? Secondly, where do I find that?
And third of all, why are you guys planning January 6th? Anyway. All right. JG.
So was that your final thoughts, JG, or is that?
Do you have any final thoughts?
Final thought is, like I said earlier on the other stream, I think Network is one of the quintessential 70s movies. I mean, it was an era that gave us a lot of films that were kind of poking the bear. That's how I would put it. The Coppola movies, like The Conversation, the Pakula movies, there were all these great films coming out that were really poking the bear and making us question things. And I think that Network is almost like a culmination of a lot of those movies if you were to put them all together and, tie them up in a nice little bow and give them as a gift. I think that's what Network is for me, and I think it's a really great film, and it's still prescient to this day.
Conan?
Yeah, I mean, as I've stated many times before, this is quite simply one of my favorite films of all time. Not the least of which is that can spark this many, not just discussion, but this many discussions on this many topics. And I still feel like we barely covered it.
And it's been a fun 3 hours.
Well, and
we had to talk about Rick Perlstein.
There's something.
Hey guys, have you ever seen a suicide live on webcam?
There's something so vital and poignant with Howard Beale's just desperate, howling, humanistic entreaties, to say, I'm a human being. God damn it, my life has value. And if you don't get chills when people start actually having that unified experience of fuck yeah, I'm going to open up my window and start yelling. Like you got people of all colors and stripes and castes and so on that are all over having this unified experience of just saying something is not right. I don't know, man. It's one of the coolest moments in film.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
and that's in a movie fucking filled with amazing cool moments in film. Like, it's astounding. Like, it's still how many I've seen this movie all the way through. I'm only counting all the way through at least a dozen times. And I watched it last night. It was like, fuck, that's fucking good. That's some good fucking movie making right there, right? And then, you know, I think we very adequately covered Faye Dunaway's character. You know, she's the quintessential like totally gorgeous, but like empty, morally PMC type Terminator, in a way that we had no idea would like those people would
Catherine
basically
Lou, come on the show.
We had no idea maybe that like those people would like rule us basically, right? Like that, like the Reese Witherspoon in Election people would like.
I will say that this movie kind of very much highlights the fact that it's not just her kind of ruling us. It's also the it's also the Frank character, like, you know what I mean, being like business is management. Like, it's all about management now. Like, and then kind of Ned Beatty's character using that to fucking clobber him at the end of the movie, right? Like their decision to kill Howard Beal comes from the fact that he's like, oh well, maybe that just comes from bad management. It's this.
Yeah, he says bad management. Yeah, exactly. A problem like this is usually caused by bad management,
and that's a weapon to clobber him with, because management has kind of taken over as the full, the full extent of this. Not to interrupt you.
Which is exactly what you did. Yes, but that I agree with the point. Like, and like it's important to note that like this is the first film that had reached this level of popular lexicon that kind of brought these ideas forward. And the idea that Faye Dunaway's character is not explicitly evil. She's just moralless, and not even in a noir way.
And
in a way that like noir would be too cool. Like, it's not
like Robert Duvall's character is too, and the entire boardroom is like, it's the same, like kind of like, oh well, if the bottom line is affected, and there's an entire room of people that are just like, how would it affect our bottom line? Well, in this case, and they're like, oh well,
because and they game it out. They game it out, right? I'm not. Yeah. I don't feel bad interrupting you, because technically this is my final thoughts. But like they game out like, well, if we fire him, he's just going to go to another network, right? Like, so they literally work out that like, hey, why don't we just kill him?
Yeah,
and it's just another decision.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's all right. Well,
it's the same point, man. But like it's just like, but it's stunning to have it put forward that way, because I think that as much as like movies, the Paranoia trilogy, like like Parallax View and whatnot, show that like government can do that kind of thing. This is maybe the first. Say it. This is maybe the first movie I can think of that shows that happening like as a private enterprise, which was chilling for people. And a lot of people were like, "Oh, this could never happen."
And not just on behalf of private enterprise, right? Like,
no, like literally in the boardroom saying, "Let's kill him." Well, if we did that, how would we do it? Well, obviously,
and it's kind of the banality of something like the CIA. Like, the CIA isn't people in the room, like, no, but someone in a government institution is deciding to kill someone. They're not just like, oh my god, this is going to be so cool. It's literally just, how would it affect our bottom line if
it's a business decision?
Yeah,
and that's.
No, finish your thought.
I'm not even done with the first part of it. Like, but
I'll mute myself.
Yeah, the fact that it's just a business decision. It's just the bottom line, which comes back to one of the other great monologues of all time, which is Ned Beatty, who was justifiably Oscar nominated for his like, here's how the world works speech, which is so chilling, so nakedly, monolithically predatory and matter of fact that it still echoes today. And I said it all earlier, Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, even the YouTube radicalization, anything with a message being commodified and like sold back to anyone else, it's all here. This is all forecasted here. And it was done in the concept of satire. It's just that it's not satire anymore. And if I come back to anything, I just want to say that, like, I think that for me, one of the lessons I've learned with, Howard Beal, the most reluctant of prophets, let alone reluctant of heroes, is the idea that we all need to become the media.
All right, is that it? Because I have my final thoughts, and they're gonna be epic. Are you ready? You have messed with the primal forces of nature, Mr. Beal, and I won't